Hi everyone, Armoured Pants here, and I have another video for you in the German line. This is the Tier VIII tank destroyer, the Ferdinand. As always, we have a complete guide, and we will look at the tech spec using blitzhanger.com. But before we get into that, like some other tanks we've reviewed recently, this tank or tank destroyer is historically iconic. And even though there weren't so many produced, it nonetheless had an amazing impact in World War II when it was introduced by the Wehrmacht. You can see here some of the iconic images from World War II. The Ferdinand, as it was its factory production name, called after Ferdinand Porsche, as it was from the Porsche works, nicknamed the Elefant due to its sheer size. So both the Elefant and the Ferdinand are the same vehicle. You can see here two knocked out. There weren't enough of them produced by the Germans to have an effect. Here's one knocked out in the Eastern Front. Soviet soldiers look out as it's placed under guard to be inspected by Soviet engineers later on. And here's one knocked out in Italy, and German soldiers look on, and it actually looks like the crew escaped out of the back of this. You can see the fire marks, damage on the crew exit. Interestingly, I read about this in this book, which I just finished a couple of weeks ago, called Blood Red Snow, which is written by a former Wehrmacht soldier who served as a heavy machine gunner. And there's an amazing passage in this book where, for the first time, Ferdinands appear on the Eastern Front. And they frighten even the German soldiers themselves. They're so noisy, so big. And the impact they have, he describes how they fire into oncoming Soviet armour and just devastate them. So, really cool book. If you haven't read it, definitely recommend it for you. Now, this is a very cool tank destroyer. As we said, it's historically iconic, the Elefant or the Ferdinand. The gun is amazing. It's a thing of beauty, if that is not oxymoronic. The 128mm gun is the way to go. You want to get that ASAP, the top gun, because it's 128mm of pain. It has a decent reload. It's just under 10.3 seconds. It's not as good, let's say, as the Jadgpanther II, which has the same gun. But this tank has other benefits that the Jadgpanther II doesn't have. Now, the gun has low muzzle velocity, so therefore I use supercharged and refined gun to get that muzzle velocity up. And you can get it up to just under 1200 meters per second, which is quite acceptable for a tank destroyer. And as we always say, muzzle velocity is very important because it has an exponentially better effect because it's squared in the formula for armor penetration. So that's why muzzle velocity is so important, and it's so important to maximize it. You get much more effective DPM doing that. Now, this obviously has no turret, but actually has decent traverse, which will surprise the enemy. And that makes it actually quite a good brawler. And the frontal armor is just troll. I mean, look at this. You are very difficult to pan front on. You are presenting all sorts of difficulties. It is trollish. You see there, if we look at the sides, you're producing massive relative armor number on the sides too. So if you're angled up and front onto the enemy, this tank is very, very difficult to pen. If you're top tier, forget about it. But even if you're up tiered, even some tier 9s will find it difficult, particularly if you wiggle it around like that. If you wiggle like this in battle, you'll see, look at the armor numbers on the top left hand side. They are really going up. So wiggling that about, you will see you create really high relative armor numbers. And you're going to see in the game, I get quite a lot of bounces in this tank. Now, here's where it's vulnerable, right? On the back and on the sides. On the back and the sides, when the armor is flat, you are vulnerable. Therefore, I run 2 repair kits on it because I don't want to get stuck out in the open with my sides or back exposed. But you can run engine accelerator if you want to. I don't, but that's a personal choice. And the back, you're going to be a HE magnet. And because you're a tier 8, there's going to be some big guns out there, right? Big guns. Borsigs, waffle tractors, T30s. And if they get a shot onto the back of you, even like something like a T34 with its gun, if he gets a shot onto the back of you, he's going to do a lot of damage. You know, the sides, as you can see, are paper thin, so you're going to be a target for HE firing monsters. So therefore, you need to keep your sides and back in cover. This is a front-on tank. You need to keep the front facing the enemy. If you're in a brawl, use that traverse speed to keep the front facing the enemy. Now, even though it has no turret, that may seem difficult, but using the quick traverse speed, it is possible. And you'll see in the game I get into a couple of sort of semi-brawls and brawls with medium tanks, and I'm actually able to keep the front facing onto them. Now in terms of play style, you can play this as a classic TD and watch the watch the tank destroyer guide we have on channel to see what you should do there. You can also play as a medium or heavy support vehicle, moving behind mediums or heavies, support them. Depends on your experience and play style. If you're lacking in confidence in it, just sit back, let somebody else spot up the enemy and use that gun to do damage. But if you are confident and you're comfortable with the tank and TDs, then you can surprise the reds by following up with your heavies, or even more importantly your mediums, because that's not expected. Now of course it's not always possible, and there are limitations with this tank. It's not as agile, let's say, or mobile as the Jadgpanther II. You're not going to be able to get from one side of the map in this tank as you could in the Jadgpanther II, for example. So it's more call per game, and of course you need to check the setup on the map, and then of course it is about your experience as well. So let's have a look at the game. In this game I'm going to play as a medium support vehicle. So I'm going to push up behind the medium tanks as they go towards C. And I'm going to almost play like a heavy medium tank. I'm going to let my mediums, the AMX, T43 and the Panther, I'm going to let them go, spot up the enemy. I'm going to keep right up with the Panther here. And basically, I don't think the Reds are going to expect this. They're not expecting a heavy, what is often perceived as a really slow tank like the Ferdinand Elefant to come up supporting C. They're especially not going to expect it to be right up there in the mix with the mediums. But this is what I'm doing. I'm going into this dip here where just the top and front of my tank is going to be exposed, because I am confident in the armour of this tank. Now just look at how good the gun is here. Front onto the Tiger, and just almost a 500 alpha roll onto him, not having a good day at the office. And you can see just how effective this tank is. Now in this dip here, as long as my allies don't let the Reds come up behind me, I'm in a great position, because only the front and top of my tank is showing. And even though I'm up against a heavy tank, I know he's only a tier 7, I'm going to be able to bounce those shots. You can see here I put one into him, almost another 450 roll, and the Tiger is bouncing from me. And he's going to bounce quite a few shots, and actually in this game you're going to see me bounce a lot of shots in this tank. It really is a bounce monster. Now again, I'm in this dip, I'm not giving them a target. Again, another bounce. You can see here straight off the top, another bounce, and I've already blocked now almost 500 in damage. And then I fire one. I only have the top of the Tiger to see, so I'm going to switch up to a PCR so that I can pen his turret, because I don't want to roll out of my cover position here. Again, I block him, and as I'm using APCR now, this 128mm gun is going to go right through the turret of that Tiger, straight through, as you can see, and I have him down to one shot after I launch off this last round. I already have my purple ribbon for damage blocked, another 400 plus alpha roll onto the Tiger, and then I roll back into this dip again, giving them nothing to shoot at. They can fire at me all day long here, even with APCR, it's not going to go through. Another bounce and I clear off the Tiger. And that Tiger really is not having a good day at the office. He cannot pen me because I'm front onto him. I'm in a dip, so he can't get any of the vulnerable parts of the tank. Now I've cleared off that Tiger. Now these two meds are going to try to flank me, go around the side, because they want to get at the vulnerable parts of my armour. But I push onto them, and I'm going to face onto them here, and now it's really difficult for them, because now again they're faced with the frontal armour here. I put a round through the Indian Panzer, and really, sorry, T43, and these guys, they're just not having a good day at the office. Now you can see here again, look at all those bounces I'm getting. Again, I'm off gold ribbon now for damage blocked. Sorry, that was T44, not T43. T43 is on my team. Again, another bounce coming up here from the Indian Panzer, and we know that the 90mm cannon on the Indian Panzer is a good gun for a medium, right? Has good pen, but he's not having any luck whatsoever trying to pen me. Look at that, another bounce from him. I wiggle and jiggle. I'm not giving the AMX anything to fire at. He backs off. He takes a round for his troubles from one of my allies. Now I'm going to push on again, front on, and look at this big alpha round right to the drive wheel. Blows modules as well. 575 alpha roll, really phenomenal. I'm going to wiggle, jiggle, creating those angles that we looked at in the tech spec. This is why we should always look at tech spec before we play a tank, because we see now in gameplay what we were looking at in the tech spec, right? We were wiggling, jiggling the front of the tank in the tech spec and the armor inspector. We saw those angles, how red they were. We saw the relative armor angles. And now in game, we're producing that in real gameplay. And we know what's going to happen. We know those numbers. Now we clear off him. And look at this, guys. On the right hand side now, you'll see a round come into me as I clear off this Indian Panzer. And believe it or not, we are now 2.5 minutes into the game. I've blocked almost 2k of damage, and that's the first penetration I've had. It's the first piece of damage that I've had this round coming in here on the side, and that's pretty phenomenal. So that 221 round that's coming in here, I've done 3.2k of damage. I've blocked off over 2k of damage, and we'll see here now. I'm going to push onto him, and again he is having all sorts of trouble. Look at that, 2.2k of damage blocked, and I clear him off. And these meds, they're just not getting anything to fire at. They're just getting hammered by me. I'm putting rounds into them left, right and center, and they just can't pen this monster front on. It's called the Elefant for a reason. Its hide is thick. Now I'm going to push back here. I'm not going to push on directly in front of that AMX. That's a bad idea, and he has a big gun, a good tank destroyer, so he can maybe pen me, especially my lower glacis. So I'm going to push on here, and this is where I want this AMX side on. Panther goes in. Look at that, another 575 amp roll, and I've done a massive amount of damage here. Net damage in this game is 6.4k, 4.2 dealt and 2.2 blocked. Now, as we've discussed before in game philosophy on a few of the videos, game philosophy, as I look at it, is like this. In total hit pool of your team combined versus that of your reds, when either of those reaches 0, your team loses. So if you block damage, not only are you not receiving damage, you are also stopping the enemy damaging your team, because every shot fired at you is a shot they cannot fire at the enemy. So that's why I always say that damage blocked is as important as damage dealt, because you're not only stopping yourself losing hit points, you're also stopping your team losing hit points. And if you look at the game model, that game philosophy that I like to look at, where your total combined hit pool of your team versus the total combined hit point pool of the reds, when they reach 0 you lose, then you are having an exponential double whammy effect on the success of your team. So that game was 4.2k damage dealt, but it's a 6.4k damage net, which is amazing, phenomenal for a tier 8 tank. And you can see there, massive carry for me, 3 times more damage than anybody else, and significant damage blocked as well, which had an amazing effect. I got the steel wall, as you would expect, and the high caliber as well. So there we go, a really good example of how you could play this tank, I think. So let's have a recap. This is a super German tank destroyer, really good, and the frontal armor is troll. Push that into the front of the enemy and they are going to have a really difficult day. The 128mm gun is beautiful, and that 10.2 second reload is fantastic when you consider the amount of damage you can do. The tank itself is not fast, but it's not as slow as people think, and people are certainly not going to expect you to move as I moved in that game. It is excellent as a traditional tank destroyer, but you can also support your meds or your heavies. And there's no bad decision really. You need to make it based on your own gameplay and your own confidence in how you are with the tank and how you are playing tank destroyers. But then there's no shame in sitting back and farming damage, sitting behind and supporting. Supercharged and refined gun are essential. Get that muzzle velocity up because it's quite low otherwise. It has a big gun, so load out the HE because RU, SPIC, AMX, light tank line, they're all nice meals for that HE. Engine accelerator is an option. It's not required though. I also don't use it because your back and sides are vulnerable and you don't want to get tracked out in the open. Angle up that front as we looked at in the tech spec and then we saw in practice in the game. You will get bounces, wiggle and jiggle that. And have fun, mix it up, surprise the Reds. You can be a scourge for them as I was in that game, and they were not expecting it. Nobody's expecting you to turn up supporting your Meds at sea on that map, or you know, on the flank of other maps, but you can do it because the tank is not as slow as you think. It only does 30 kilometers an hour, but it accelerates quite quickly for a tank that's heavy. So anyway, thanks for watching. Cheers Mush, I hope you enjoyed it, I hope you found it useful, and I guess all that remains for me to say is pants off.